Hello and welcome. My name is Scott Farthing. I am the Interim Dean of Fine Arts and Media Technology here at Saddleback College. Today, in our next episode of Saddleback Arts Live at Home, we have Kate Bergh here. Kate is our resident costume designer, makeup designer. Kate has had an incredible career. She has costumed in every major theater from here to New York and back again, and in films. And her knowledge about fashion, costuming, and how all of that relates to our everyday lives and relates to characters that are created on stage. Her knowledge is the best, and we are so happy to have her on our staff here. Kate.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm happy to be here.
So what are you talking to us?
Well, I'm talking to you about how social change kind of engenders change in fashion.
I can't wait to hear it. I really can't.
All right, well, we're going to start right here at the 1890s. Whoops. Already there's a whoops. And I want to talk to you about how this lovely figure came about, and it comes about because of the underpinnings, which start with a corset that shapes the body in an S form. So if I turn this lady to the side, you'll see that she has what's known as a bustle, and there's a lot of engineering that goes into this bustle. There's a cage under here, there's padding on top, and that it just reinforces that S-shaped curve that this corset that you see on the screen helps form. So the tiny little waist, the powder pigeon bosom, and then all this draping. And there's a lot that's going on down here. She's got a petticoat, she's got bloomers, she's got a chemise along with the corset. There's a lot happening. So this dress was made for and worn by one of our students for the production of Peter and the Starcatcher, which we did last year, our first production last year, and about this time, right after about September. And so that was when they're by Mrs. Bum Break, so you can get the joke, because this is her bum right here. So then we go to 1910, and this is actually after a French designer. And by the way, all these clothes are from our stock. All these clothes came from our stock, so we're really happy to have them. I was really happy to find these for us tonight. So this dress, a French designer named Paul Poirot started doing a more natural line of clothing. So the silhouette is not so forced, the skirt is not as wide, it's a little bit more free-flowing, and it's the Edwardian age, or as we also know it, the Downton Abbey era. So you can see that this could be worn in that show. This dress doesn't have this, but they also had hobble skirts. So their skirts were very close. In the upper classes, the skirts were very closed in on their ankles. So they couldn't go very far, very fast. So then what happens is World War I happens, and in England, it was they entered the war in 1914. We entered the war in 1915. And what happens when men go off to war is that women go off to work outside of the house. And so they can't work in these long skirts and the long drapey things. They have to be more utilitarian. And in the same fashion, they also become a little bit more mannish, a little bit more practical, a little bit more utilitarian. So we have this lovely dress. I think it was used in our opera, Bernice Bobs Her Hair, that our own Norman Weston wrote for us, and that was just this past year too, and it was just a lovely opera. And this is around 1910, 1913. So that's where we get this progression from in that era, from 1890s to 1910s to the 19-teens. What's also happening in the world is women's suffragette movement, and you'll see a lot of similarities in this frock with what they wore in the suffragettes. Now, there was a suffragette named Amelia Bloomer who did not invent the bloomers, but they're named after her, and she was so ridiculed by wearing those bloomers, which were so freeing for every woman, especially in the movement, that the suffragette movement decided that they had to just go back to wearing what they were wearing, where they sort of managed suits, like in the picture over there. And they all wore white, and they had sashes of white with purple and green, and they all were symbolic. And when you got all those women marching and rioting and, you know, pushing for the vote, I mean, it was quite a sight for all those women in white. So then we're going to skip all the way over to the 40s. Let me just, okay, so, I also wanted to mention something else that was happening during that time, which is very relevant. There was, when the soldiers came back from war, they also brought the Spanish flu, which became a pandemic fairly quickly. And then the women had to go back into the trenches, you know, as nurses, as caretakers for the men who were suffering from the Spanish flu. So there was a lot of work that the women had to do, which the corsets that they wore in 1890s were certainly not going to help. So, on to another war, World War II. So in World War II, which started, we entered the war in 1941, but we were rationing even before then because we were sending supplies to our allies. So in the United States, there was very little rubber, no nylon, no silk, no metal of any kind, no zippers, no snaps, no corset boning, and sort of we, you know, breathe a deep sigh of relief that there's no corset boning available because the corsets are awful. But again, the women go back to work and they have to be very clever about what they're wearing because they don't have very much yardage. So the skirts are shorter, very much shorter, and the detail, there's this beautiful detail on this suit, this tweed suit. There's this little pocket detail right here. It's not functional, but it's just a lovely little detail. And they just sort of start looking like, you know, more manly, more take charge, more go out of the house kind of work. You would never wear this at home to work unless you were working in a pandemic, and who does that? And then 1947 happened after the war. Christian Dior comes out with a new look he calls the new look. And there's no rationing on fabric. There's rationing here, but there's no rationing here. So what we have is miles and miles and miles of skirts and fabulous fabrics. It's a taffeta. And then the petticoats come back. So we have the petticoats here, which are reborn under that dress right over there. So yeah, so we have this, so we have the 40s, no pandemic here, just rationing like crazy. Then we have, let me just see, I'm not keeping up with my slides, sorry. So we have 40s. So the slides you're seeing are the women in these suits, and then they also were wearing pants more frequently, which was very looked down upon in the 30s. And then the corsetry, it slims this whole part of the body. It's a long corset, so it's different like that. Pearl Harbor, yes. So hard on the heels of the 50s, of course, is the 60s, and the 60s are epitomized by Jackie Onassis. There's the Dior New Look, and there's Jackie, and Audrey Hepburn. So they're very put together, they're very tidy, neat and tidy. They beautiful bright prints, bows, very feminine, bows were all over the place. But you can just see somebody in a country club in Connecticut in either one of these, I'm sure. I mean, this was all the rage. My mother wore these, my grandmother wore these. So, and this gives way, in the middle of this, we have civil rights movement, we have the Vietnam War, the protests against the Vietnam War. And from those things and the beat movement of the 50s comes the hippie movement, which is sort of gets its height in the Summer of Love in 1967. And at first, I was reading about this. It's so interesting. The hippies were first considered to be very dirty, drug-addicted, low-life people. And then they sort of reorganized themselves. This is earlier in the 60s. 67, at Summer of Love, they kind of coalesced and became their own movement and stood, and before this, of course, but they stood next to the African Americans in their fight for civil rights, which happened eventually in 1964. Similarly to the Amelia Bloomer situation with them not wanting her to wear those crazy clothes. The African Americans dressed as if they were going to church because they had to be absolutely irreproachable on every level in order to achieve the goals that they set out to do, which finally ended up in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So this is this from here, I think is the hugest jump we're going to see in the 20th century, right here. It's this very closed up, very, very buttoned up, very Mad Men look to this free-for-all in clothing, which you still see. They kind of try to recreate that for the festival look, but the real thing is you can't do the real thing without being the real thing, I think. So that's that for that part. And then I did some research on what we're going to be wearing in the future. And here's our hippies. Here's our social masking here. That's one thing we could wear. The woman in the grocery store is completely covered up. That might be our future. And then we have sort of automatic social distancing. I love the woman in the pink. She's all masked. Her whole head is covered with a mask. Or we have social distancing sombreros and a big gown that keeps people away, and then something that covers it all up. Just a big old, basically a onesie hoodie kind of a thing. So I think that's might be what we're wearing after this pandemic is over.
That is so fascinating to watch the progression and to know that it's really about the things that are happening in the world are really what's informing all of these fashion choices, especially about the rationing. I thought that was it this dress that
yes.
you were talking about?
Yes.
So what would the buttons have been made of?
Bone.
Bone?
Bone, yeah.
Like animal bone?
Like animal bone. We still use animal bones for buttons. Yeah, all the wood too, but not plastic. They would all be wood. They would be wood or bone or covered buttons. They would cover their own buttons.
So now, talk to me about sleeves. Like, because all of these sleeves are so different, and so the shape of the outfits, and I get that. What would determine the sleeve length, and how was that kind of decided upon?
Well, I think it's all about proportion, really, and the designer's eye or the body of the woman who's going to be wearing it. I mean, this is I probably designed like this to show off the lacy under. She would never have bare arms, she would never have that, but to show off the lacy part of this blouse. It also stops at her waistline, which kind of accentuates the waist, which was the whole idea in that period.
Was to make the waist narrow and everything else.
Yes, and that's where the 50s too. I mean, you'll see that the 50s, you'll see that this one, the sleeves are shorter as well. They're probably 3/4 length, so it'll contrast with the dress, so that again the waist looks smaller. These sleeves are just copies of a man sleeve.
Oh,
Now, a
interesting.
man sleeve is two-piece. There's two pieces. This one happens to be one piece. So if you look at your suit jacket,
Yes.
there's a piece down here
Right.
and a piece up here.
Oh.
It's shaped. The better ones. This one is just so she can do the dishes.
Easily pushed up.
Easily pushed up or tend to a sick person.
This person doesn't do dishes.
That person does not do dishes. This person doesn't either. And these sleeveless girls don't either. But
Well, I kind of want to see somebody wash dishes in that. I would
Yeah.
wash dishes in that.
I would
That's
totally.
pretty beautiful.
I would do that if I had a nice apron. And then this girl, I forgot to mention that, aside from the bloomers and the petticoat and the corset, she also has to have a lady's maid to get into it.
So a lot of this is how do you get into these dresses?
Right, and women of this class sometimes change 4 times a day. Sometimes change, so they change to have breakfast, they change to receive guests, they changed for dinner, and if they went out, they changed for that.
For that afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so all of this is reactions to world events.
Yes.
And you talked a little bit about the future with these kind of full covering clothes.
I did that with my tongue firmly in my cheek. I really think this pandemic is going to show us some interesting things. I can't wait to see.
Well, we're already getting some,
Yeah.
masks.
Oh, the masks are great, but I think that they're going to be even greater. I hope we don't have to wear them for very much longer, but if we do, I have some ideas.
Well, all I know is I'm already starting getting advertisements for tie and mask matching sets. It used to be ties and handkerchiefs, but now it's ties and masks.
Yeah.
And I thought, I hope I never have that much time to do that, right? I mean, that feels like a very calculated kind of marketing thing.
It's totally calculated.
So I've been thinking a lot about, we're all working at home and, the jokes of the people wearing the nice shirts and the sweatpants on the bottom, How are we going to further the concept of what our quarantine wardrobe is going to look like? Is there a big kind of development of, nicer sweats?
You mean after we're out of quarantine?
Well, no, while we're wearing,
While we're in
because
quarantine?
this is going to be here a while.
Well, I think that everybody's going to be sick of wearing their quarantine clothes pretty soon.
Because I know for me on Thursdays when I come here and do this and I put on it's like I get to put on real clothes
Right.
today.
I think people, and I've seen on the internet that people are dressing up just for the fun of dressing up.
Yeah, because it's like, your clothes in your closet are going, hey, remember us,
Yeah,
right?
I'm here. But I also think that there's a certain kind of, I think people act differently depending on the way they're dressed. No matter whether they're dressed from the sweats from the waist down and have a beautiful blouse on top. I think if you put the matching pants to the blouse, you behave differently. When I'm in a fitting with an actor and we hit what's going to work, I can see that actor change before my very eyes.
Right.
And they change right into the character and they totally get it, and it just becomes one whole beautiful thing. And I think that depending on who we're talking about, if it's your local realtor, or we were talking about banking before, let's say you're a banker, you don't want to see your banker in sweatpants.
No.
You don't want to see your banker in, a tank top. You want to see your banker being like a banker, because it's all about they're taking care of your money. So there's a uniform for things that we're used to.
And there's also this sense of we recognize the character.
Right.
It's like, so when we're doing a show, and you and I have not had a chance to do a show yet, which I can't wait for. I can't wait till we get to do that. But I know that, like, watching especially students and their first, costume fitting, and you can watch them, see it in the mirror, and their self-confidence
That's
changes.
what I mean. They find their characters in the fitting. It's just a really beautiful moment.
And they're like, I always love in a show when you have that first rehearsal with costumes, and and they come out on stage, and every single time, the performance elevates.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think that translates to non-performance as well.
Yes, it does. I think you're absolutely right. I think we were talking before. I think that we're going to get sick of the sweatpants, and we're going to start dressing up because we want to be professional, and we want to be, and whatever that means for people. You know, maybe it means put on a clean T-shirt, or maybe it means you put on your three-piece suit.
Right.
I just think we're going to yearn for that professionalism.
And I think that there's also something like, in the spirit of full disclosure, I love to shop. I do, and one of my favorite things is to go walk into Bloomingdale's and just walk around. I don't need to buy anything, but I like to walk around and see. And it's always so much fun to watch people picking out their clothes and what they gravitate towards, and you can almost watch the sequence and be able to bet what the sequence of events is going to be. Like, they see it, and then they touch it, and then they pick it up, and you can almost tell whether they're going to put it back or take it into a dressing room. And that act of deciding who your own character is going to be by what you pick out.
Yes, because you dress up as a character every day.
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, you know, I used to call this my Dean drag, because, you know, I don't, wearing a suit is not natural for me. That's not something that I.
Well, you look great.
Well, thank you. but really, that we all choose those items of clothes that make us feel better, that give us confidence, that tell a story. And
that raises us up a level.
Right, it does. And so that when I watch you and the wonderful costumers we've had and got to work with, watch them elevate the students into another character, into another performance, that their training and the hard work that they're doing just gets lifted up even more.
Right, and in a fitting, it's so interesting because I will be telling them these stories. I will be telling them, like, you need to understand. They go, oh, I don't want to wear a corset. I said, well, you're missing the boat if you don't want to wear a corset, because it's all about the corset. And then they get into it, and then they go, I said, and then this is what happened, and then this is why they wear corsets, and this is why, you know, we could, you know, if you took the belt off this could be the washerwoman, really.
Right.
So, you know, the lady's maid is wearing something like this, you know, while she's wearing this. You know what I mean? So if you're the lady's maid, you're in a rough wool. If you're the lady, then you're in a beautiful, you know, like cashmere, you know, that sort of thing. So, and they go, oh, okay. Sometimes they're blank, but that's
Not
okay.
Yet. They might not get it yet.
Right. They can grow into it. But I mean, even getting them into a corset, you know, is not that easy. I mean, the hips were very slim in this thing. If you didn't have slim hips, you were kind of out of commission for a while. But just, you know, they can't raise their arms in this because the armholes are too tight. Well, I can't raise my arms. Well, then don't raise your arms. That's all. You just don't raise your arms.
Because then that informed how you would carry the purse.
Exactly.
All of those other things that we forget about.
That's right.
And
she can't raise her arms either.
No, and she wouldn't.
No, she wouldn't.
No, absolutely not.
No.
I also think that the opportunity because we all love clothes, we all understand clothes in some level, right? We don't understand the whys and the hows and how it evolved, but we do understand kind of what the message sends, right? And it's so interesting because this is always such a good opportunity to teach history, to teach how women have evolved in social construct. As you know, I joke a lot about, you know, women weren't invented until 1970, right? Which, you know, if you read history books, it's glaringly left out a lot. And I hope that we're approaching times where we can correct that, right? And I'm speaking especially about music history, like music history books.
Yes.
It's like women didn't compose. Well, they were composing probably more than men.
That's right.
But you're teaching so much about culture and about all of the things that we teach in other classes as well, but you're teaching it in such a concrete matter because you can see it.
Yeah.
And you can feel it. And then putting that on, like a person wearing the Miss Bumbrake dress is going to walk very differently than this person.
That's exactly right.
Right?
That's exactly right.
How do shoes fit into all of this?
How do shoes fit in
How
all
do
of it?
shoes fit into all of this in the development?
That's a really interesting question because I was just reading about that. This woman would have worn ankle boots, the granny boots.
Oh yeah, really?
Lace-up granny boots with a little spool heel. This woman would have worn. This is an evening gown, so she would have worn a shoe that had a very long pointy toe and it would be a pump, we would call it a modern pump, also with a spool heel. This woman would probably be in some sort of a flat brogue because she's working, so that would be a man's shoe basically. This woman would be in a pump, probably a little, maybe a little higher heel for her, and then not so pointy a toe. It would be more rounded
because
toe.
she was working.
Because she's working and she's a professional. This woman would probably have satin shoes on. It's called court shoes because that's what they wore when they were received at court.
Right.
So this is very formal. So she would be wearing a pump, but probably she'd have it dyed to match. Do you know about dyed to match?
Sure.
So she'd probably have it dyed to match.
I was raised right. I know that.
Yeah, so you know about that. This woman probably she might have had, if she was going to a cocktail party, she might have little platform shoes with raffia around the side because that was very fashionable in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. She would have pumps on and she would be barefoot.
Right. Which is kind of sounds good right now, actually.
Yeah.
Actually. Kate, thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome.
This is, I think that this is such a beautiful example of practical education, right? This says so much, and it's a language we all understand.
Yeah, I think that's really one of the, for me, it's the only way to teach. Because if I lectured you on this, you'd be taking notes, but if you wore it, you would get it.
And you learn, what is it? You learn about people by walking in their shoes.
That's right.
And you learn even more about people if you wear their clothes. Right?
That's right.
So,
and even more if you wear their corsets.
Oh my gosh, I have a corset story, but that's not for today. Thank you all for joining us today. Next week is our last in our summer series of Saddleback Arts Live at Home. Melody Bergquist-Turori, who is our academic radio program coordinator, is going to be talking to us about our Saddleback radio program and the evolution that it has had over the years and the wonderful partnerships that we have. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful way to end our summer series. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Have a good week.